Hi, everybody. This is Teresa Sullivan, your fearless beader. I'm going to continue to do actual beadwork with nailheads today, and I want to point out that I am wearing nailheads. This is a necklace that I bought at the Twilight Rummage Sale in Portland many years ago. Twilight Rummage Sale, I don't know if it's still going on, but it's held in an Eagles Lodge, and it's a Friday night thing where people can drink as well if they want. And that's something I scored. And I've been wearing it ever since. Notice that the nailheads are the black beads, beautiful jet black glass, and they have two holes. What whoever made this necklace did with it was to take a head pin, string this bead on, string it through the first hole, string it through the second hole, string the next little bead on, and hook it on. Make a loop at the top to hook on to this box chain. I'll get a better look at it. I'll use this handy dandy close-up lens so you can see it. But I thought I'd forgotten about it, and I wore it today, and I thought, oh, hey, I can share more nailhead fabulosity. I'm angling the pieces toward the window next to me so you can see the facets that are on the top side of them. But yeah, I will get going. The other agenda that I had for this video was hopefully not too heart-wrenching tales, but some tales of people who said they wanted to do artwork and ended up not doing artwork to the extent that they wanted to. So I'll get into that soon. Meanwhile, before I do anything further, I will do a screen share of my exciting camera so you can see my bead plate with its beads on there. And I haven't done a dang thing with this since I last saw you. So I'm just continuing where I left off. And I'm finishing off my thread first, and then I'll begin a new thread. So I'm just going to use this as a kind of something to do while I spiel at you, because as usual, I have a lot to say. Before I get further, I'll show you those exciting, move this out of the way. The table I never bothered to sand down and refinish, and maybe never will. I don't know. Maybe somebody after, when I have that great estate sale when I croak, somebody will buy it, and then they'll do something with this old school table, mid-century, whatever, that kind of thing, table. Focus, sesame. Come on, baby. There you go. You'd think I had AI attached to this camera here. I just noticed a chip out of one of the, a mild chip out of one of them, but it doesn't seem to detract from my appreciation of it. Hopefully not yours as well. But yeah, this is really cool box chain. It's just brass. So are anything that's not glass on this piece is brass, I believe. And I'll flip it over so you can see the hollow quality or the concave quality of each of these gigantic glass nail heads, and how they use accent beads on top and bottom, and they just strung through the back of it. It's just another way to use those exciting nail heads. So yes, on to the heart-wrenching tales of people who at least said they wanted, well, one person in particular who at least said that they wanted to be an artist, and their actions showed otherwise. And please note that I'm not judging this person, I'm just observing. And I want to emphasize that they probably had plenty of reasons for what they did and didn't do. Again, it's a free country. They have free will. Nobody's gonna. I'm certainly not going to shame them into doing something that they don't want to really do. But back in the day, I worked with a guy who had completed his Bachelor's of Art degree at Pacific Northwest College of Art. And he was, yes, he was an artist. I was at first encouraged to know that I was working with an artist, but I quickly found that he was, in the vernacular of the, back in the day, they used the term a company guy. He was first arrival in the morning, last to leave at night. And this is a place where it was strictly hourly wage. We had the old school time clock with a big punch card, and we would literally punch, put it into the slot in the morning, and it would stamp out. This is pre-digital. It would stamp out the date and the time that you arrived. So if you're 15 minutes late, they know to dock your pay, right? And he was very enthusiastic. And at first I thought, yeah, it makes sense. He's an artist. He learned to use ceramics in school. He is, he's qualified. It's, how bad can it be, right? But the first indication of some trouble was not too long after I began working there. I saw him, basically in shock. This is the side of his hand having been turned to hamburger because he had taken a piece of tile that apparently needed to be smaller than it was, and had the bright idea to set up an electric sanding machine and just grind that piece of tile down. Well, he ground the side of his hand down, his right hand as well, and he's right-handed, I believe. And in his efforts to make it work. And again, I'm not condemning this guy. In fact, I've done really, really stupid things. Have had some accidents myself, and usually those happen in a similar situation involving the basically the idea of trying too hard. And so I thought, wow, that's pretty scary to see a guy go to work and see a guy in shock, who just turned the side of his hand to hamburger, or what looks like hamburger. And God, I thought, oh God, that's just too much, right? Well, things went along, and I was a little envious of the guy because he had a slightly cushier position at the place. He got to sit. He was able, due to the type of work he did, to sit down while he worked, for example, etc. When you're on your feet on concrete floors all day, it is actually a luxury to be able to sit down. For a lot of people who work in offices who have to sit down all day, it's not a luxury. It's actually a different type of hazard. But in this context, it was not the, it was comparatively cushy. Now, later, the guy was, we had some jocular fellow employees who made light of his devotion to the job, and he acquired based on his last name. I'm not going to reveal the identity of this guy because I don't want to be a jerk, but his nickname was Wet Leg. And again, it's just that, if you want to get into class politics, it's just that basic working class distrust of anybody who is that eager to please in a context that really had no serious opportunities for advancement unless you really like punishment. And I'm not talking about the type of punishment that people pay to receive or whatever, but honest, just not fun situations. But the guy eventually, yeah, he progressed and he was given some official supervisory duties as a part of his job. So yes, his first to leave, first to arrive, first last to leave um, efforts were ostensibly rewarded. Um, and I received I already worked with somebody. Sometimes I'd work in the office for some reason. They thought I was, I could type. I was adept at some non physical work activities. So uh, I already had met somebody who was basically a workaholic, and this lady was not just a butt kisser. She was a truly addicted to staying at the job and getting the job done, whatever it was, at whatever cost, including her own health. She was a really particular cautionary tale because at one point, due to her putting in uh, due to her physical condition and having put in generally 6 10-hour days at the drop of a hat or possibly more at her desk, and frankly, to be honest, not even getting up to use the ladies' room as often as she should. She actually was hospitalized with a blood clot in her leg, and went to the hospital, recovered, narrowly avoided death because blood clots in the legs lead to strokes and so on. And when she went back to work, guess what? She had a lot of work to make up. So she was working 6 10-hour days again, fresh out of the hospital. So yes, I saw this happening. I had thought that I should take notice of this and realize that you can literally just about kill yourself working. And I'm sure there are many tales about this, but the way it was happening with this other guy who his hand recovered from the hamburger incident, I'm happy to say, but his unfolded in a more subtle fashion. The first indication of his trajectory that really hit me was when he got his own office. Oh boy, he got his own office on the factory floor, and it was basically a tiny place that, luckily for him, had an air conditioner in it, because this is a tile factory, and what happens in tile factories is that you have dozens of large-scale industrial kilns, and those kilns put out heat. And when it is 90 degrees outside, it is 120 or 125 in the kiln room, and it is generally 100 on the factory floor overall. So yes, he moved up. He moved into an office that had an air conditioner, and he took phone calls and made reports. The day he moved, I noticed something on the floor which really struck me, which really sadly which was a drawing that he had made, and it was completely done on really nice drawings paper, professional grade drawing paper, and the style of it was great. It was, let me look up Brian Geisen for you guys. If you haven't heard of Brian Geisen, it was in the style of Brian Geisen, basically. I will stop my share so you don't have to look up my search engine stuff. But Brian Geisen is a buddy of William Burroughs, or vice versa. They collaborated. Oops, I moved my camera. And I will look for a Brian. Okay, here we go. Found some. Oh, this is particularly great. Okay. Well, I'll make a long story slightly less long and let you do a screen share for this item of Brian Geison's, but basically he's an incredibly talented guy. Lived in Morocco, collaborated with the famous writer William S. Seward Burroughs. I think this is an example of his artwork. And now this is extremely rare. Again, I'm getting into class politics here, but it's extremely rare in a factory situation in America in the 1990s to encounter somebody who has heard of Brian Geison, much less likes Brian Geison, but miracles happen, right? So this guy is hip to Brian Geison, right? So why don't I go back to the camera shot that I'm doing for you guys so you can watch me bead again. And he, because he was a fan of Brian Geison and he had artistic talent, he had made a drawing that was not exactly like that, obviously, but it evoked Brian Geison's wonderful artwork. And I had commented on it when I first saw it. The sad part about it was that the day he moved his office, I discovered that drawing that he had made on the ground with a dusty boot print on it. And I don't know if the boot print was his own or someone else's. We all had to wear steel toes by that point, so it could have been anybody's because we're all wearing heavy duty industrial work shoes. But that really told me that the fact that I said something about it and I retrieved it and I said, hey, don't you want this? This is your cool drawing. And answer was no. Later I heard from his own mouth that he ultimately wanted to be a potter, having worked in a tile factory. It's creative, right? No, it's not. It's production work. It's you don't get to sit there and create. You produce on schedule. You explain why if you don't get something out on time. So this guy wanted, at least told me that he wanted to just have a cool pottery studio up in up on Salt Spring Island or in Vancouver Island and be a cool pottery guy. But his actions betrayed that was not his top priority. Now you figure, okay, well, the guy, he made a trade-off. He wanted to get ahead and be a supervisor at this factory and, have a 401k that is, can be cashed in and redeemed later and, and have some security in his life and so on. And he also, I should add, had a background of having come from a fairly well-off family, but he was kind of the outside, a bit of black sheepishness there. He possibly was partially dyslexic, and he was not a math guy like his brother. And so he was basically, they let him go to art school and they patted him on the head and said, well, now you need to get a job, So, so he had some familial pressure to not be a potter in the woods and have a studio in the woods doing his own thing, right? And in terms of his spelling ability, I know people who are dyslexic who are totally sterling, wonderful, worthy people. And this is not a slam on dyslexia, but the guy himself was, he was in his I'm the manager phase and I'm going to make you do stuff phase. And my one beef with his spelling was that he would print out these signs from his little computer in his little office that read mandatory overtime this Saturday. My only beef was that he couldn't spell mandatory correctly. And my kind of running joke was, I'm not coming in unless he spells it right. Well, he never did. I remember I somehow, I don't know how I did, but I somehow escaped the mandatory overtime requirements. It, I don't, this is long enough ago that I do not remember how I did that without getting in trouble. But yeah, he spelled it Manditory, and the term mandatory comes from the word mandate, so it's spelled Mandatory. But I'm being, when you're in a situation where you're stressed, where you're not, you're not fulfilled, you're not getting, you're begrudging the tiny bit more, tiny bit fatter paycheck than this guy presumably gets. You, okay, I, maybe not you, hopefully, uh, resented the heck out of this whole mandatory overtime thing. And I was very willing to get snotty about anything I could relating to that. But in any case, to an extent, his efforts were in vain, as shown by what happened when our overboss, the manager of our part of the operation, either resigned or was let go, or either quit or was fired. And he presumed that he was right in line for that guy's job. However, that did not turn out to be the case. And he had to, suffer under the uh, slightly lower position below the guy that they brought in from headquarters to run the place. But I figured, hey, he, if he's more concerned about purchasing a house and home ownership or whatever, that's his choice, or which he did, etc. But basically, the last I heard about him was that he had moved out of state, and I thought, oh, great, he's living in a rural area. Maybe he's got that pottery studio that he claimed to want to have, and maybe he does. But on his LinkedIn profile, it shows that he's a plant manager at another tile factory. So he, hopefully he's doing okay. I don't know. But when I hear about that, and it reminds me that, okay, maybe I'm a jerk for quitting my job that I hated. And maybe I'm presumptuous for thinking that it's okay for me to do artwork. Um, Even as I find out that, of course, when you quit your day job, you end up with kind of it mushrooms into 20 different day jobs, because suddenly you are creating art, finding out a way to market your art, uh, publicizing your art, being your own manager, purchasing your own uh, advice, materials, publicity, whatever else goes along with the at least sporting chance of selling work, and also doing things that stave off the reality of having to actually sell your work to make a living, which is things such as teaching and getting grants and so on. So again, ultimately, when the roll is called down yonder, maybe there is no difference between having that job with its 401k company contribution and the fact that you're not only supposed to be there for a minimum of 8 hours a day, you're supposed to actually act like you care. And again, it's just a matter of, okay, what is killing you to work there? Okay, if it's not good, if it is, do something about it. At that same factory, I had a couple near-death experiences. One, the most poignant and the one closest to my departure involved a lady with whom I was partnered for just for the day to do inventory. Everybody does inventory. You get assigned a partner, you get assigned to a different portion of the factory, and you count the number of tiles for the yearly inventory in that section. Then you mark it off on a piece of paper, you go to the next section. Well, the lady with whom I'd been partnered showed up approximately 3 or 4 hours late with alcohol breath. That's another story from the factory that, I could go into, but I won't. But despite the fact that they had an, anti-drug and anti-alcohol policy, apparently they put up with a certain amount of it. Well, the area in which I worked for about 3 hours before lunch, before we clocked out for lunchtime, because you don't get paid for lunch and you get a half an hour and you have to clock out and then you have to clock back in after you're done eating your food. I finished that area and I was really glad I did as quickly as I did, even despite not having somebody to work with, because about 15 minutes after I left that section of the factory, about 2,000 to 4,000 pounds of tile suddenly fell with no warning right onto the area in which I'd been working. It turned out that a guy who was not certified and not certified to use a forklift and had very little experience on the forklift was riding a forklift, and he pushed some tile. You have to picture a bay that is accessible from, essentially a bunch of shelves, super heavy duty shelves that can hold literally tons of tile that are accessible from both sides. Well, from the side opposite where I'd been working, he put a load of tile, a pallet full of tile, back onto a shelf, but he did not know that he was actually pushing another, literal ton load of tile off toward the other open end of the bay, and subsequently, tile crushed. So had I taken longer to do that inventory that day, and it was not an area where I normally worked, I would not be here to tell you that tale. My husband would be a widower, and my whatever artwork I had done by then would have to just go into the history dustbins or whatever. So yes, I took that as a definite get out of here now, and that's why I'm doing this instead of working at the tile factory. I mean, sure, I could have had a desk job by now, but I did not feel it was worth it. And no, sure, I might not have a 401k or whatever, but I know people who do, and I can think of another person, and I won't bore you with this tale, but to make a long story short, his creature comforts came before I'll stop short of saying self-respect, but he was constantly complaining about the job he had, but he never left it. And by the time and this guy considered himself a rad punk rocker, right? Back in the day, somebody who was there back in the day, right? But he, decades down the line, he's just going, oh, all I've got to do is make it 6 more years and I can take my retirement and tell them to get lost, and et cetera, et cetera. And in the meantime, he's working his 40 hours a week or whatever, and he's drinking 37 beers on Friday because he's so depressed and he wants to get away from it. And then by the time Sunday comes around, he's just watching videos hungover and not looking forward to going back to work. So yes, I know that it's wonderful to have a retirement fund. It would be wonderful if I did, certainly, but I want to also be alive enough to enjoy my elder years, and I don't see that guy doing that, honestly. So again, sorry about the preaching, folks, but I just, I keep hearing people say, well, not keep hearing, but occasionally I'll hear somebody crow about how they have a fire in their belly and they're really going to be the coolest artists in the whole world. And I just want them to know that, don't let that fire in the belly go out just because it's 20 years on and you're not the next Keith Haring or something, or the next Basquiat. Keep that fire in the belly well stoked, and know that even if nobody knows or cares about you, you have to know and care about yourself. The flip side to that too is literally some of my best friends are work full-time in a job unrelated to the artwork they do, and they're fabulous artists. So, and they manage to do both. And so I want to make sure you know that, yes, it is possible to do both. And no, you're not a dilettante just because you have a day job. A dilettante can, you can have nothing but time and money on your hands and be a dilettante. And actually, honestly, it's fine if you're a dilettante. I don't begrudge that to anybody. So in any case, basically, the gist of the whole thing is just whatever you do, respect it. And even if you only get to do artwork or your chosen medium, what is it? 15 minutes every other week, you're still making art, and that counts. Don't want to get all, corny about it or, pander to anybody, but I do think that every little bit of art that you make is big. It's not little, it's big. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope it wasn't too didactic or preachy or whatever. But hey, I put some beads together. What I've been doing is using small ends of thread. I've been working on a different project. That's why I kept having to change my thread so often. I've been working on a different project and ending up with, due to the logistics of it, relatively short lengths of thread that were not so short that I wanted to throw them away. Therefore, I kept them on the needle, and I've been using them for this, even though they are short. And I just say, as far as thread goes, I'd rather purchase, if I'm going to buy something, buy equipment and supplies, I just assume, come on, focus sesame, baby. There we go. I'd rather buy beads than thread. That said, I should send out an appeal to anybody who has silicone thread that they're not using. Why? Because most beaders can't stand silicone. I love it. And I have trouble I'm having trouble finding spools, and I'm talking about 900-yard spools of silicone thread. So any beaders out there, you got a spool of black. It's got to be black because that's the color I probably use most universal. Black is a wonderful color in every sense of the word. And I just can't find it on spools. And once in a while, it comes on cards as well, but those are pre-cut lengths that you end up with, and I need them just a little bit longer sometimes. So any beaders out there, I'll buy your ceramide spools from you. What can I say? So on that happy note, again, the guy whose story I told, started out with the hamburger on the hand, ended up in the still working at a factory, albeit a different one. I respect the guy. I respect the heck out of the guy. And it was a blessing to even look at that drawing that he did with those funny little squiggly lines on it. The only reason I didn't take it home myself, maybe I did, but I ended up not keeping it, was because of that sad, dusty boot print right in the center of that wonderful piece of artwork. So I doubt that guy's going to see this, but he knows who he is if he does, and I just want to send him my warmest regards, and I want to thank you for being with me today. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to turn the pooter off, get my little close-up camera out of the way, take my little close-up lenses off. And by the way, I need reading glasses, not because of beading, but because of the computer. So there. So on that happy note, and other happy notes that I'll probably dribble on with for a little bit, I hope that you respect yourself and your beading, and I suspect that you do, even if it doesn't feel like it sometimes. So I'm right there with you. Take it easy, everybody. See you next time.